government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens.
There are so many different types of political systems.
Of the people, by the people, for the people.
Yet, the world seems to be obsessed with democracy.
Meanwhile, we should talk about sanctions.
She wants to ban Russian energy.
Everyday Russians are starting to feel the squeeze of international sanctions.
And there's nothing that a democratic country can get in today's world if they boycott a certain country's products that China cannot if they sanction the US.
Everyone here is shocked.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
President Biden called the move unjustified.
And that was enough for me to ask myself if democracy at all is working, or is it just another label to fool you, me, and everybody else? And to answer all of it, we need to look back at the history of democracy first. So democracy today is vastly inspired by the French Revolution, and a lot of countries even include the motto of the French Revolution in their constitution. But to understand why the French Revolution is so important, we need to understand why it happened in the first place. It's the 1600s. Europe is under monarchy rule. And around this time on Earth, people loved to go Game of Thrones on each other. I mean it. Around this time, the peasant class people were burdened with high taxes to keep things rolling as well. In 1774, Louis XVI became the new king of France. The government used to monitor crops very closely at the time so that the government could quality check and redistribute everything properly. But in September 1774, the new finance minister passed a new law that reduced the government's control over crops, distribution, and quality check, which resulted in the Great French Inflation. This caused riots and the Flower War. Not that Flower War. Interestingly, in 1776, King Louis helped the US gain their freedom from the British, which was expensive for France. Now, the peasant class people were still living in poverty, unemployment, and inflation, while the king decided to make a palace for himself, which, along with everything else that was happening at the time, was enough to piss off the people. Then came the Age of Enlightenment. This was the time when people transformed all of their hatred and anger into a bloody revolution and brought democracy in France. I will be making a separate video on French Revolution to include some more juicy details on this, but for now, let me tell you why it's not the French Revolution where democracy was actually born. Democracy started in ancient Greece. It served as a tool for the first ever self-rule government. The system and ideas of ancient Greece have shaped how democracy looks today. The word democracy itself comes from two Greek words, demos and kratos. And it was the idea of every citizen having a say in who their ruler would be and what actions they will be taking. Although modern democracy is shaped through the ancient Greek ideologies, the Greek version itself was very different. For example, it was mandatory for every citizen to participate in the government for at least a year in ancient Greece. The Athenian definition of citizens was also different. Only free men were considered citizens in Athens. Women, children, and slaves were not considered citizens and therefore could not vote. So, R.I.P. Abraham Lincoln back then.
The historic win for Narendra Modi and the BJP.
Donald Trump and Sean Hannity like to talk before bedtime.
New this morning, Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has agreed to resign.
From ancient Greece through the French Revolution to the modern world, democracy has gotten different versions of itself across different countries of the world.
Campaign 2016 has escalated from awkward air kissing.
Like, the US calls their version the representative democracy, while India, which by the way is the largest democracy on earth, calls their version a parliamentary, democratic, secular republic. And I can't do justice if I try to explain all of these types of democracy in just one single video. But imagine if you're at a restaurant and there's amazing food on the menu, but, and it's a big but, It will be the people of that restaurant who will vote on what you will eat. Now imagine they voted for you to eat beef. And imagine that you're both allergic to beef and based in India. And that is how the founding father of Greek philosophy, Socrates, felt about democracy. Socrates compared society to a ship. He asked, if you were heading out on a journey by sea, would you want random people to control the ship, or would you rather have professional trained captains do the job? Imagine democratically electing one of two candidates to fly the airplane you'll travel on next time. Scary, right? Socrates claimed that voting is not an intuition, but a skill that requires vast knowledge. He said that allowing random people to cast a vote is the same as putting them in charge of a ship sailing through a storm in the ocean. And so, how does any of this relate to democracy failing today? I mean, there are countries like America and England and Australia who are thriving, right? Wrong. The world was stunned in 2000 when George W. Bush was first named the winner of the US presidential race, even though more US voters had cast ballots for former Vice President Al Gore. And again, in 2016, Donald Trump beat out Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College, but only obtained a minority of the public votes. So how could US call itself a democracy yet not select the officials on the basis of majority rule? Take China for an example. China lifted over 300 million people out of poverty with its central government. Heck, China is the world's second largest economy in 2022. India, on the other hand, is the world's largest democracy, and India has over 300 million in poverty. Not to mention, India's 2G scandal is second only to America's Watergate. I'm not saying that dictatorship is the solution. It probably never is the solution. But there are options to explore. And if democracy isn't fixed soon, we need to be prepared for a crash. If you've watched till the end, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Let us know your thoughts on democracy in the comments, and we'll see you again in the next one.